This is For All the Saints with me, Paul Sutton, and today we're carrying on in our series about children. I wanted to tie up some loose ends, probably just a short episode today. And by the way, I'm working on my interview technique. I realise that this interview and the one that I'll release next week are a bit longer than the episodes that have come before, which is totally my fault. But hopefully there's some good stuff in those longer episodes as well. I wanted to tie up some loose ends, which Peter and I started talking about in our first attempt at recording our conversation last week, but then actually didn't make it into the final version, about what the Bible says about the salvation of infants who die in infancy, which I think we kind of gestured at and implied, but we didn't make really explicit. So I just wanted to give a few biblical examples and reasons why I think that certainly those infants who are part of God's family, part of his household, the church, who die in infancy, are certainly safe with him. The first one is from the story of David and Bathsheba and the baby who is born to Bathsheba after his adultery and his murder of Uriah the Hittite. In 2 Samuel chapter 12, the baby who's been born is dying, and that's part of God's curse on what had happened and on David. Well, David fasts and pleads with God to have mercy on the child, but the child does die, and it's only once the child has died that he actually stops fasting and wailing and the rest of it, and starts eating and living normally again, and his servants are confused. And here's what David says in response to them. This is 2 Samuel 12:23. Since he has died, why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me. David is talking about his expectations of the future, of his post-death reunion with his child. And I don't think he's just saying something banal, really, which is just, I'm going to the grave too. I'm also going to be in a grave or in a tomb with this child. He must be saying something about a comforting reunion with that child, that David has an expectation of being with the Lord, as we read in the Psalms, after his own death, and therefore where he'll be, so also this child will be, and he'll be reunited with this child whom the Lord slew as judgment upon him. Another example, which isn't about infants specifically who are dying, but it does talk about infants, and I haven't mentioned this verse before. It says in Psalm 8, verse 2, out of the mouth of babies and infants, you have established strength because of your foes to still the enemy and the avenger. And Jesus picks up on this in Matthew 21, relatedly in Matthew chapter 11, verse 25, to talk about how it's the children who recognized him, who sang Hosanna to the Son of David. And he praises God that he's revealed these things to children and weak, insignificant people and kept them hidden from the wise. Again, that's not just an in-principle idea, but it's talking about actual babies and infants. And Jesus is picking up and saying that those are the ones who have grasped the kingdom, or rather have been included in it. Another example specifically about infants who die in the Bible, one that's not often discussed, I think, in these writings on these topics, is the bit in Matthew chapter 2, verse 13 to 18, where Herod, seeking to kill Jesus after he's heard that King of the Jews has been born, requires all the male children aged under 2 to be killed. Not only is that just a horrific, real massacre that evidently did happen, but we've got to reflect on how can that be? How does that fit in with Jesus' salvation? And I think particularly where it is those children who die instead of Jesus, it's deeply unfitting for them to perish in order to save Jesus, when the entire reason why Jesus came into the world as a baby was so that he could die on behalf of and to save sinners. So it'd be very unfitting for those children to be cast away into hell because of Jesus, if you like. Now, I think those texts, certainly the 2 Samuel 1 and the Matthew 1, prove that some children dying in infancy are safe with God and blessed with him. But I think really it's the bigger Bible picture that I looked at and talked about with Peter last time, about God's promises, the covenant, about the children being included in that, about the children being part of those promises, the children being holy. That's what these verses slot into. Those verses are underwritten by the promises rather than the other way around. And that's why we can say with confidence that not just these particular examples of children dying in infancy, but those children who die in infancy within the scope of God's promises and covenant are certainly safe with him. Now, perhaps you've listened to the last few episodes and thought, goodness, this is a bit heavy. Why is there so much emphasis in this brand new podcast about children dying? Well, let me just give 3 different reasons for that. Firstly, this is a real live pastoral issue that we don't talk about much at all. We would know many people in our lives who have lost children, whether that was after they were born or before they were born and at various stages in pregnancies. And we simply don't know that about them. And it's a massive trauma in people's lives. And particularly for Christians, if we haven't considered these questions or haven't found satisfactory answers to them, it can be a huge spiritual discouragement and burden as well. And I want to release that burden and discouragement for us, to say that those of us who've lost children in infancy or prior to birth, we ought not to doubt that they are safe with the Lord and blessed, happier that we are with him. Jenny and I have lost several children ourselves in pregnancy at various points. And I guess I want to talk about that partly to honor God for his mercy to them, partly to honor them by talking about them. And just as David said, that he can't bring his son back again, but he'll go to him. Well, so it is with those children. We mourn their loss with confidence and with hope in God's promises by talking about his grace towards them. So that's the first thing, that is a real pastoral issue. Secondly, I think this topic of children and salvation, it's a hard case that really opens up our real, more general beliefs about salvation and how it works. Remember that Jesus said, to enter the kingdom, we must become like a little child, like an infant. And largely that's because only infants can contribute nothing. They are truly receivers, recipients of kindness and grace. Now, we have to say, in light of everything the scriptures say about salvation by faith in Jesus Christ and in the promises, we have to say that children are saved extraordinarily, not by that means of their own personal faith. The ordinary means by which we're saved is by hearing the word, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and being saved through putting our faith in God and in him. But this extraordinary case of children who are saved in infancy, and who knows how many countless millions of them there will be on the last day, this extraordinary case reminds us that all of God's salvation is truly his salvation, is by his power, by his grace. It's his promises that underwrite it all, and nothing that we do. Thirdly, this question about children, where they fit into the story of salvation, I think provides a necessary backdrop for other questions about how children fit in to the church, whether they should be baptized, how they fit into worship, how we should instruct them, whether they can receive communion, those sorts of questions. And those are some of the things that we're going to be coming to over the next few episodes. So I just wanted to set that up, and we're nearly there. We've nearly laid things up for us to tackle those questions more directly. So just a quick one to round off that question. If you've got any questions or want to talk about any of these issues, I'd love to hear from you. Paul@allsaintsexeter.org, or there are other ways of getting in touch with me as well.